is 9:01. It is the third Tuesday of the month, which means it is Lakeside Chat time. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being on for June's edition of Lakeside Chat, June of 2026. We are now over I think we're close to the 30 mark. I think this makes it almost 30 Lakeside Chats have happened, which is why people keep coming back to listen to me. I have no idea, but I appreciate the fact that you do. Excited for today's conversation. And I'm excited for two things. I'm excited, obviously, because I get to be joined by two great humans and have a really great conversation. And our prep call, if our two prep calls were any indication of the fact that we will fill an hour with no problem. I think the other thing that I would add to this is that Lakeside doesn't always, we are big believers in abundance mindset. We are big believers in thought leadership and making sure we're bringing together community. We're not always great about talking about the things that we do. And so this is really, of the 30 that we've done, this is really one that we can really kind of hang our hats on, is one where we can talk a little bit about the true relationship between Lakeside and Dori and the client. And so I'm excited about that piece of it as well. Before I go too far down a diatribe here, I want to just do my quick rules of engagement for those of you that are potentially new to Lakeside Chats. I do have to remind you on the very front end of these conversations is that these are being recorded, and the recording will be shared for future viewing. So we post each one of these Lakeside Chats from a live perspective for people to be able to review or download for future viewing. So I say that only just because I have to be reminded of it too, so that I don't say things that are inappropriate. I also will tell you that the deck, though, any links that are brought up, either whether in the chat or if there's things or books or conversations that we bring up along the way, I'll consolidate that and send that in the follow-up material. So the link to the recording, anything that we talk about, and then I will advise you on the front end that today's deck is way less deck than it is a roadmap for where we're going. So there's not a lot of content in said deck, but I'll send it to you anyway. And then I will let you know, as again, for those of you that have been on these in the past, we want to encourage as much of your participation as possible. And so all of the Teams features are out there for you to engage. So whether you want to raise your hand if you have a question, react to something with claps or hearts or sad faces or whatever. But obviously the chat feature is the one that we'll be using the most today, and we'll be asking you to participate throughout. Oh, I've got somebody. Oh, a couple people need to be muted. Sorry. Those of you that I'm muting, I apologize. With that said, these again, somebody was already showing us how the Teams features can be used. So it was like the apropos moment to the fact that our Teams features are set up for you as participants to be camera off, mic off, but your mic can be turned on. If there's something you really feel like you need to add to the dialogue, feel free to turn your mic off. I will tell you, I have godlike powers and can turn your mic off as well. If you want to turn your mic on, we might turn you off. With that said, positive discussion, genuine curiosity. Amy, Dori, I don't think any one of us has recognized that we are the foremost authority on any one thing. Yes, no?
No.
Unfortunately, or fortunately. So there are no right answers here today, and that's okay. This is really just for information sharing and conversation starting. And with that, I want to introduce those lovely faces and voices that you've already gotten a chance to have me reference. So today's voices for today's conversation is Dori Seegar of Yale Mechanical. Dori, do you want to just do a quick introduction of your role and a little bit about just a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Dori Seegar. I work for Yale Mechanical currently as their CFO. I've actually been here 26 years now, almost 26 years. It's been a while. Kind of started here as a staff accountant, had made a career pivot from histology, the study of body tissue, and pathology, kind of lab work, support work, into business and accounting. So I have a few different degrees, but I finished up my accounting degree when I started here at Yale, and have really been blessed with the ability to grow here at Yale in my accounting career. And here we are 26 years later. I entered the accounting manager role, the controller role, and now the CFO role. And have been able to be exposed not only to the growth of Yale, but what it's like being part of private equity and growth in that sense and the M&A process now. So you wouldn't think you'd get that diverse of exposure in your accounting field when you're with what was used to be a small company and then became a medium-sized company. But I have been exposed to that and been blessed in my career here.
Love that. And then the other voice for today's conversation is Amy Toppen, which some of you might remember has been on one of these before. I have forced her hand to be on be my second voice before. But Amy works closely with Dori and with Yale Mechanical, and as well as obviously works really closely with me here at Lakeside. Amy, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Amy Toppen. I have been with Lakeside for just over a year now, and really, celebrated an anniversary, and have worked with Dori and Yale actually for almost the same amount of time. One of the first clients I engaged with, and so at Lakeside, service delivery director, making sure that as we engage with clients, they are experiencing our values, and the value we can add to their business in any way we might engage with them.
Love it. Okay, so let's kick off as I usually do with a quick reminder of who it is that we are. So again, I realize I just had you introduce yourselves and I just assume everyone knows who I am, which is probably ridiculous. I'm Erin Hargrove. I'm Director of Business Development here at Lakeside, and have been the host of the Lakeside Chat since we kicked these off in January of 2024. Lakeside HR Group, for those of you that potentially aren't overly familiar with who we are a recruiting and HR consulting firm whose mission is to strengthen small to mid-sized businesses through personalized recruiting and HR solutions. We pride ourselves probably most of all in our values. I feel fortunate that Amy talks about having been with Yale since almost day one, and almost my day one came from writing out what we thought the 4 values of Lakeside would be. And those are the fact that we are genuine, curious, scrappy value adders. And you will notice I did not look at any screens when I said those. They are intrinsic to who I am and who we are. And so you'll hear those words probably brought up already throughout there. I know I've already brought up 1 or 2 of them already on that first slide, but you'll hear them throughout today's conversation as well. Secondly, I want to just remind you that Lakeside is the premier and sort of the founding sponsor of Radiate People. Radiate People is a membership community for independent and solopreneurs. So again, if you're on the chat and curious to learn more, please reach out to me. I'm happy to share more about what Radiate People is as well. With that, I want to kick it over to our first chat conversation and getting those of you that are on the call to start answering questions. This is not a quiz, but this is just to get your perspective. Dori already referenced it, right? She started out with Yale when it was small. She's now sort of referenced it as being mid-size. You heard Lakeside talks about working with small to mid-size. So we're going to talk about size and employee count to kick off today in terms of a question. So at what employee count do you think HR becomes necessary for a company? Again, today's topic is really about when to engage outside HR support. And we're big believers in the fact that it doesn't always mean that all companies of all size need internal full-time headcount dedicated to HR, but at some point HR becomes necessary. So you would in the chat answer, is it under 25 employees, 25 to 50 employees, 50 to 100 employees, over 100 employees, or the beautiful HR answer of it depends. Kristen's already kicked off with an it depends. Thank you, Kristen. Sheila says under 25. Chad, great answer. As soon as you can justify the expense. Chad, I may have you go more into that here as we jump into it because that's a beautiful answer. Dori, well, Amy, I'm going to have you actually answer this. So when you came on board with Lakeside, you'd have been with various size companies working in an HR role. Have you seen any sort of thematic on your end in terms of what size makes sense for an organization to add HR?
Well, in a true HR practitioner, I can't get the word out.
Practitioner?
Practitioner.
There
Yeah,
you
I
go.
have not had enough coffee this morning. Practitioner. I'm going to say it depends, and I have been with companies under 30. I've been that, number 17, number 18, but I've also come in at a few hundred. And so, yeah, I think it truly does depend. And obviously the cost is an impact as well, whether that's an internal or external partnership.
Dori, how about you? So again, you've now 26 years with one company, and I know your story looks a little different as well. So for you, is it a size component in terms of when do you think it becomes necessary to bring in HR?
No, I would say it depends. And I think, probably a lot of people could list what it depends on. And one big factor I'll throw in there is we're union. How we engage with our union folks, which makes up 75% of our employees, is different than how we engage with our non-union folks, which is primarily, sales and office and support and maybe warehouse. That engagement and the amount of support needed when you don't already have HR in the business, like your lens to that is different. You're not recruiting, the union does that for you. You're not allowed to recruit, right? You call the union and that's how you get your people. And there's a good chance they probably already work for you. So it's just reboarding them with certain paperwork adjustments. And so I would say it depends, because if we were not union, we would have needed it sooner. We probably did need it sooner, but we for sure would have known we needed it sooner if we had not had so much of our workforce be union and have so much of those rules like defined and how you engage and the fact that you're not able to do your own recruiting, etc.
I think that's a beautiful reason for the it depends, right? Like the makeup of the structure of the business. I think two things I heard you say there is one, the recruiting function, right? Recognizing what role does recruiting play, which is again, I think, especially if I think of the Lakeside story, right? We're recruiting and HR consulting. So both of those players make a point, right? The idea of recruiting is a piece of HR. And so how much do you need to do? I think the other thing I heard you say was the idea of even just turnover, right? The idea of how much I love the word reboarding. I feel like you just made up I've never heard reboarding before. I'm going to totally steal that. But that reboarding concept, right? The idea of if they already know what it is that you do, if you're not spending a ton of time and the performance of the role isn't as necessary, there's some element to the it depends there as well. I love that. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you, so there's facts and figures out all over the place, but the fact and figure, one of the facts says it's 1 to 100. And I like the it depends answer way better than a 1 to 100 concept, if I'm 100% honest. All right, Dori, let's kick off with learning a little bit about Yale and your tenure, your 26 years of being there as well. Because I think there's a piece of understanding its history, but also understanding a little bit of who it is. And you've already told a beautiful part of that with the union side, but do you want to share a little bit more about who is and let us sort of meet Yale Mechanical?
Sure. Yale was started in 1939. Meat and potatoes, HVAC, commercial construction, and repair service. It's been a big evolution in the last 87 years. Some notable things along the line are starting a millwright division in 2004, 2005. And I think you'll find people will be like, what's millwright? Well, or is millwright like those people who install wood around my door, the trim out? Actually, millwright is predominantly in like the manufacturing and industrial sector. So if you wonder, who installs and maintains and keeps those machines running that produce your cereal and your cereal boxes, or produces the tires, anything in that line, there's equipment and various things within a building that does manufacturing and production that requires maintenance and installation, and it's not a cookie cutter process. Millwrights are involved in that. That's what they do. It's a pretty vast amount of skills, and adding them really added some complexity to our organization. You know, they define reboarding, honestly. So
The new word.
yeah, the new word reboarding. We can, reboard 20 millwrights one day and, for a large project, and 3-4 weeks later, they could be moving on and working for another contractor for a few weeks and be back with us. They follow the work, especially in the union setting. And then fast forward, we started a dock and door division that happens to use millwright union labor, and that has really taken off. In 2022, it really ramped up. And then in 2024, we purchased a company in St. Cloud. We now, refer to them as Yale North. And so that M&A activity brought a lot of changes and growth. So now we're at standard, we're probably a little over 200 employees as a standard employee count, but that can jump from week to week.
Okay. So you heard new division, so sort of an added business offering. We've heard M&A piece of it. When you started 26 years ago, what was the head count until you said roughly about 200 today?
It's interesting because when I started, the head count was relatively high because we had 2 really large out-of-state projects happening at the time, like ADC World Headquarters, where we had a significant amount of traveler union staff. So I would say that the employee count then wasn't much lower than it is now, but when I started in 2001, you had kind of the 9/11 and then that 01-02 downturn. So that quickly went down, that employee count number, when those jobs wrapped up, and didn't really ramp back up again for a while. So I would say our standard employee count when I started was probably around 80 to 100.
Okay. So yeah, you've really seen the roller coaster of where Yale has been at its peak to falling the whole piece of it. It's a loveliness of working in finance, as you really are become an essential component to it. Talk a little bit about the people issue. So your people. So not just the number, the head count, but are there particular, you talked union already, and obviously that comes with its whole other sort of element, but are there other sort of people issues or people challenges that Yale has endured over the 26 years that you've been a part of it?
Sure. Yeah, I think like with any organization in growth, you definitely face challenges. We have a pretty deep bench of long tenured employees, and we really did up until probably about 23, 24. And then we had a pretty large list of retirees happening in that time period. And when I say long tenure, I'm saying anywhere from 15 to 40 years, people with that kind of tenure. So that really creates some challenges. You have to replace that talent to some degree, but you also have to take your current talent and rise them up to fill what are big shoes. When somebody has been around that long, they have taken on more than you realize. And so without a strong platform or cadence around that, it creates a little bit of chaos. Like, how are we going to fill that? How are we going to fill those holes or those gaps? To that, though, we're blessed because we have a lot of long tenured employees, and we definitely have an entrepreneurial kind of culture.
Got it. There's such an element to especially the work that you do, right? Being in the trades element and hearing about, what you just said, I think is probably pretty resonant of what others would say is there's long tenure of institutional knowledge of people. And then once they've been there for a certain amount of time, retirement becomes a huge people challenge. How do you find the talent to fill it? How do you transfer knowledge from somebody is probably doing it without even any element of an SOP, right? They're just sort of like, no, I just turn it 2 degrees to the left and 4 degrees to the right, and all the pieces of the puzzle. How did you overcome that? Kind of what was some of the tips or tricks or processes that you guys went through to go through that talent is concern?
Well, definitely, promoting within, we're pretty big on that. In fact, I think our employee base expects that to be happening. They'll question when it doesn't, unless it's pretty obvious it shouldn't. So I would say we definitely utilized that lane quite a bit, but there are a few areas where our succession planning, maybe we were caught in the sense that we didn't do a good enough job. And so, then we're trying to fill it from outside sources. It's been a challenge because the fight for talent has been a challenge.
Yeah.
In the last few years. So I would say we've used various methods, but mainly I think we've leveraged our long-term employees network out there to really attract people to our organization who resonate with our entrepreneurial approach and everybody comes here every day to ensure that at the end of the day, everybody that works here can still get their pay and feed their families and build their retirements. And so if you kind of buy into that and you want a culture that's like that, but also a culture that doesn't micromanage, like allows you a little bit of freedom to do what you do well, this is a good culture for you. And I think, the word is out there. It always has been.
Yeah.
So we really rely on those connections and that reputation to fill those slots.
I think that's a great, you've heard it. I mean, that's been our Lakeside story too, right? Is the idea of if we start with culture, right? This idea of building and sort of formalizing and making sure the culture is really visceral to the employees and that to your point, that does create referrals and voices and, even people aware of what you do without needing to do a ton of extra to sort of get it there. And kudos to you and to the leadership team to get it there, because that's pretty incredible. All right, I want to bring Amy into the conversation and talk a little bit about the transition. But before we do that, I have to remember how to share screens in a way that makes sense. Look at me doing it. Every so often you'd think I've done this 30 times. That would be no problem. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about signs. So the signs that a business might be outgrowing the winging it approach to people operations. So we've talked about the idea. You have 26 years. Amy mentioned she's got 1 year with Yale, and so there's been change and people challenges as well as sort of people successes. It sounds like you've had over the time as well. For you, and I asked this to the room, right? So again, what are some signs that you guys look for as you either work with clients or that as an employer that you're starting to recognize that any element of winging it in people operations is now time to maybe put the microscope down or maybe look at it through a different lens? Dori, for you, was there a thing? Was there a moment?
There were so many moments. I carried I guess the HR piece as my 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. side job every night. So unfortunately, it's the last thing I'm thinking about as I toss and turn to try to fall asleep every night. It's real impactful when you get to that point, and it's all the things, right? The compliance, the employee development, the employee relations, and as you're adding new people and your company's growing, like how do you do performance management? Because you're in real danger of having people onboarded who aren't being utilized at what would be their full capabilities and what they should be doing. And, if we accept 10% from them, then eventually they're going to accept 10%, right? Mm-hmm. So just how to make sure we are tuning in on all of these things. So these things are spinning in my head every night. I'm so over leveraged. I don't have any way to really solve that on my own. And then you kind of realize that you would be failing the organization if you do not figure out a way to support these things properly. Yeah. And so I guess, is that the first sign? It's the first like hammer over the head for me. But when you have to really get out there and find and retain talent. You always wonder what you're letting slip through the crack, like the small golf balls, or you're holding the tennis balls up maybe, and you're holding up the giant beach balls, but there's these small tennis balls dropping through your hands, and you're not sure what kind of damage that's going to do, and what opportunities you're missing. And I think that all culminated in me knowing we're winging it and it's time.
Yeah. Thank you for being vulnerable, because that's not always an easy thing to admit too, especially after that many years, right? You've done it for that long. I mean, the company is growing, you're still managing and juggling all the things. Does that mean working from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. every night is I don't know, fair? I guess fair is a really crappy word in that mindset, but there's that piece of being able to say that was the decision point. Amy, I want to talk a little bit about your role. You said coming in at that year point, and a little bit of where you saw the winging it show up, and where you saw opportunity to be able to really support through in a different way for an organization that had been winging it and making it work.
Yeah. I would say winging it was putting it lightly. In Dori's 6 to 9, Dori was the ship was afloat. But when we got the call from Yale, they had real concerns going through a transition of someone they had internal that was going to be exiting, and how quickly could someone come in and be able to assist and lift on administrative tasks, right? Paying people is important. Can someone run a payroll for us? Up through, how will someone be able to slot into the culture we've built over 85 years, which is a very valid question. In our prep for this, we were joking, right? Dori's question was, have you worked with unions? And I said, not for 20 years, but at one point in my career, I did, right? And so the fears too of what's the right fit of someone coming into an organization that has such history, that has such tenure within their team, whether they be union or not. I think those are the things we were hearing, knowing we can go in very quickly, then start to uncover where there's opportunities, right? So I think one of the beauties of a partnership that I see with our Lakeside on the consulting angle, at least with our clients, is yes, they're helping to prioritize the work because they understand their business and they're letting us into the fold there, so we too can better anticipate what those priorities are. However, we also have the obligation of showing up as the HR leaders, right? You know what you know. And I think Dori hopefully will agree with that, right? She knew all the things that she needed to know, but she also knew there are people that have HR expertise, that she could take that 5 to 9, 6 to 9 p.m. and have someone think, a 9 to 5 about all of the pieces and how they holistically fit together across an organization of about 200 employees.
All right, so Dori, then I want to ask you. So I love the picture of the coming in side of it, Amy. But Dori, you mentioned the union question. Dori, what were your concerns? So again, if you have to sort of back the bus up and start to think, okay, I'm inviting a not full-time, not somebody who's gonna, wear the Yale logo on a 40-hour basis into the business. What were some of the concerns you had at that point?
Wow. So there's, to me, two prongs to that question. There's what concerns did we have bringing in HR? And then there was what concerns did we have in who we partner with when we ultimately decided we needed to partner with someone to figure out what we needed. I will say the concerns I had just bringing in HR are the same concerns that everybody at Yale had. And by that, I mean, not just leadership, I mean, our employees alike. A lot of conversation around, hey, do we really need HR? Is that going to change our culture in a negative way? We're very entrepreneurial and we have a lot of open thought here. Are we going to have to close down our thoughts and not talk as fluidly as we do? Are we going to have to watch everything we say and do? I had field superintendents coming and saying, hey, when we get a little slower this winter, are we going to have to lay off people? Do we really need to pay for overhead, meaning more support staff, such as an HR, consultant or an actual HR role? And I had to answer those things for them and for myself, quite frankly. A lot of concerns around that. So how do I frame that up, and how do I show them that relationship needs to happen, and what they gain from it and what our organization gains from it. But then there was also the concerns with, who do I partner with? Because I really have one shot to prove to everybody. Really, that's it. Like, I've got one shot.
Yeah.
If this does not go well, HR is going to be for a very long time viewed as not a good thing here. So I have to get this right. And we had a membership to one of the larger like HR support platforms out there. And of course they had an offering, but I knew that wasn't right for us. I knew we needed, and always makes me chuckle, Erin, but we call ourselves scrappy all the time.
Yeah.
And I knew we needed an organization that understands that when you have limited resources, it's not a super large organization. You have to be careful with every decision you make, how you allocate those resources. The perception by your employees is everything. I needed a partner who would understand that, and would understand that we were going to move HR in and everything was going to change and everybody was going to comply. We needed a true partner who understood that not everything is black and white, and that you have to be careful in how you navigate the change, that you manage the change appropriately.
I love the idea of you had to get it right? The idea of recognizing that, because to your point, right, the idea of, and I say this regularly on calls when we talk about when organizations don't have HR and then decide to bring in HR, there is that piece to say, this is someone we want to both trust and like, yet we don't want them to tell us what we can and cannot do or say, right? Like that is, and it's an interesting dichotomy to be in a position to ask for both, right? To be able to have somebody that comes in and says, well, compliance says X, Y, and Z, but I get it. Your culture is A, B, and C. And so how do we get to, I don't know, LMN in the middle that feels like the right mix up of the two? Amy, I'm curious, just coming out of what Dori just said, that sort of two-pronged approach of not being able to get it wrong, right? Finding the right partner and bringing in HR at a size of a business when HR is quite obviously ready for HR, right? You're at a size and space. Did you feel that? Like, and how did you feel like you overcame one, if not both of those components?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, I felt it with Dori from that first conversation. And we feel it with most of our clients, right? Like, it is a decision, a big decision that they're making that impacts their work as a leader who's making that decision, that impacts costs. It impacts the entire organization of employees feeling like they aren't sure what's going to happen. It's an outside person. Do they even understand us, our culture? And it is one shot. But I think going back to our values, right, the curiosity piece being one, we're really interested in our clients' businesses. We want to have that intimate knowledge of their team, of their culture, of the work that they're doing, that we can create solutions that are more customized, right? I think we pride ourselves at Lakeside of being able to craft those solutions in the right way versus a one size fits all, where Dori made that call and we said, great, here's our book and we're going to apply this book and it's all going to go well and swimmingly. It doesn't work that way, right? Like, that's not the real world. And so I think that the trust from the get-go is demonstrating that time and again of asking the curious questions, and then being able to talk through. And I think we'll get to this later, but I think what I saw from Yale immediately was that the curiosity on their side too, right? They have been around for 85 years and they do have really incredible institutional knowledge of the work that they do, and those tenured employees. But there's also this appetite for, if I say, maybe we could think about it this way. And there's real excitement about that too. And so I think the trust was built in both sides of that relationship, right? Of we're not one size fits all, and we're not going to force that into your organization, but also having a partner to say we want to think differently about some of the challenges we have faced on the talent side or the people side or the HR side altogether. And so that really makes a beautiful partnership to find at the end of the day the best outcomes.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like that's a great transition point to this next question. And I was just told that we might be having some chat issues. So if you have something you want to say, and your chat's not working, raise your hand and I'm happy to let you turn your mic off and we can chat. We can literally chat. That would work for me as well. But I think we talked about this. I loved, Dori, the 1-2 component to prevent with the kind of that apprehension as to bringing in HR support sooner. And Amy, the idea of what you just said, right? That sort of how do we overcome the trust factor, right? How do we sort of show them that we're not just going to come in and here are the cookie cutters and we're going to cookie cutter your business so that you have to do it just like every other business. Like, I think there is that misconception there too. And so coming in to build that bridge. So I'm just going to ask the group, what prevents companies from engaging with HR support sooner? And I think you're right, Kristen. I think the idea of fear of compliance police is 100% one element to it. If there's others, I would love to hear it. I think, again, if you had to sort of, in a word, Amy, you've worked with more than just Yale. Are there any other words that you would bring up that you feel like are the apprehension component?
Yeah, I think cost, whether internal or external partnership. I think Kristen is right, the compliance police. And I think the added challenge from the external perspective is it's not one of us, right? So how do employees feel comfortable in a way that they can approach a person, and know that that person is balancing the advocacy for an employee along with a business that is their client. And I think just we as human beings resist change. And when you partner, particularly with an external firm, with a consulting firm, I think too that resistance to change amplifies, right? Because you do have those other factors being considered. So I think that and the how quickly can we get some wins under our belt as you're coming in, and I see that as the balance of that advisory piece of consulting along with the execution. And another, great thing that our consulting team regularly straddles is that we're not just giving the advice, but we're also able to put that into effect. Bring a program, implement a program, train on a program, and then measure results on the back end of a program too. And I think commonly that's what a lot of people fear when engaging with a consulting firm.
Yeah. Dori, I don't know if you saw the chat that came in. I'm curious to get your and I'll read it to you so you don't have to pull it up. Okay. But Andrea says cost and the anti-framework mindset. I know my business and my people better than an HR person or an external person could. Dori, how does that one hit for you? That's a great one, Andrea. Thank you for sharing.
From my perspective, the internal, extremely personally invested in this organization part of me says, I do know them better than you.
Yeah.
However, the growth and change and future and strategy part of me, I think Amy can attest to this, is the HR framework, or the HR piece of bringing somebody in as a good partner and finding the right one. I then want to make sure that person knows our organization. And I think that's where I brought my value to the table. And once I knew I could have confidence, like, I'm not on here to toot Amy's horn, but I'm gonna toot her horn. When I saw her in action and really understood how much of a professional she was and her knowledge, it was like, okay, I'm going to teach her about our organization in a rapid fashion, and then I'm going to let her do what she does. So yes, all of those things, but there is a way that can get spun to a good. These people who built this, you know, the organizations have been there a long time and definitely feel that way about their folks. If they're thinking about strategy and future and they can find the right partner, they're gonna move that information quickly and actually help somebody be an even better HR partner by saying, here's where we were, here's what we know, here's what's happened in the past, here's some of our vision. Hey, when you come to the table, what do you see? And how can we make the vision happen? And what aren't we seeing? Where are our blind spots?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point, right? I mean, that's part of what you're doing in terms of being able to say why you can sit around from 6 to 9 and check the boxes that you know, but it's the boxes that weren't even on the list that you have, that's the stuff that keeps you up at night, right? It's the boxes you're not sure that you should be checking. And I think that's a beautiful, Sheila mentions the idea of liking the idea of having somebody who's unbiased, right? That third party eye set in, with, to be able to provide that genuine feedback, which I think is the other piece of this as well, is somebody else who's not the blinders that you just talked about, those blind spots pieces. I think
And
is
we
exactly
absolutely
what you
have
talked
blind
about.
spots. We
Mhm.
have the blind spots. Like, I will admit that, and I'm sure Amy would agree. We had those, and we're very receptive to that. So I think any organization who hasn't had HR, even if they have HR, probably has some blind spots.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, Amy, I want to shift it over to you in terms of I mean, you've already alluded to some of this in terms of the building trust, right? So we know going into any one of the relationships that we're going into from a consulting lens is we already have these uh, concerns that we're going up against, right? Whether it's cost, anti-framework, you don't know us, we don't need HR, we don't like HR. We go into it with the idea of, we almost have to come into it with the idea of a little bit of a preparation of armor, right? To know that these are the bullets that are coming our way. How are you, both from your own lens as a consultant, but also in terms of supporting the consulting team? How are you coaching or approaching work when you know that those bullets are coming your way?
Yeah. I I think it's the actions you're putting into place consistently. So, using the example with Yale, I am not a full-time resource with the team, right? So we communicated that transparently from the get-go to avoid some of the I'm being ghosted, I haven't heard back, right? Like, you setting the expectations of the relationship across the broader organization to avoid some of that typical consultants, right? They dip in, they dip out, they're not here. We also did Tuesdays. I'm actually here. Dori and I are just a few doors away from each other, right? Like the in-person interaction with the team, that was important to them. It becomes important to me 1 day a week to be here and to show up, and people know I'm here, right? And engage with me too. I mentioned the business first listening and that curiosity. It continues. Dori just shared, right, of the person coming in with the unbiased viewpoint. And yes, she got me up to speed of here is all the history and the things that have worked and not worked. But there is still not, when we're talking, especially around some pretty big milestone projects. We'll use performance management because Dori used that early on, right? Performance management, not just as a review annual process, but instead feedback throughout the organization as things are coming up. Our managers well prepared to coach their team and to deliver that feedback, right? it was important to take a pause there to listen, like past, present, future, right? What has happened? What did not work? What did work? How do we convert that into what works really well today? Knowing that there's going to be a future state too, which is really important from the consulting lens of I might not be here forever, right? And as the Yale Lakeside story continues, that is happening as they're bringing on a full-time HR manager now, and she's in onboarding. That's a really great thing, right? But I think it's remembering that there are iterations and stages of the relationship that we'll have with a client, and being really clear and transparent about that through each of those stages.
Yeah. Dori, as she's talking, you've had a couple moments of like, I like, it's my new favorite smile is this sort of like, I want to say something, but I'm going to let her keep talking smile. But I'm curious as she's saying that, what are some of the things or sort of stories you have in your head in terms of that evolution and trust that was built by bringing somebody in and sort of now had a year where HR is now present?
Yeah, we're excited about this transition into having a full-time HR manager. We definitely knew we needed it, probably not quite as soon as Amy knew we needed it, but we were just trying to squeeze a little more out of her, right? Just keep squeezing a little more out of her. But the reality is, I think one of the most surprising things for me in this process is honestly, Lakeside could have continued billing as consulting for probably a while longer before we would have eventually come to the realization. And I guess I'm impressed with the fact that once they knew we needed it, they had that conversation with us. They, as in Amy, saying, hey, you really need this resource. I'm getting so much traffic in all of these different areas, and this is why you need it. And our relationship will continue on higher level things going forward, but you really need somebody in here strategically and functionally on a daily basis, and here's why. And I think that's a respectful thing for a good consulting firm to do, to really say, hey, I could continue to try to give you my after hours after I'm done with my other clients' time, but that's not really what you need now. You don't need that 100% of the time. You need a different formula for that in terms of full-time resource and consultant. And so that was probably one of the surprising things. I have a few of them, but that was one of them. And I would say in this transition in the relationship is kind of bittersweet because Amy and I have a lot of time together. But I know, she's not gone. We're still connected. So, and I am super excited about the new hire and the new HR manager.
We went to the next slide without knowing we went to the next slide. So we're already there to the evolution of what's happening at Yale. So you've already sort of, the lead was buried, but we've uncovered it early. Dori, do you want to talk a little bit about what the evolution of HR is going to look like at Yale now for sort of year 2 into your Lakeside relationship?
Yeah, I think, a big part will be building on what's already been started, but also maintaining what has been built. And I'm excited about all of these. There's a lot of unknown too, but I do know it's going to be, the approach is going to be more strategic, and that would not have happened if we hadn't had Amy here the last year. I also know that the hire was made with a lot of intention, and having Lakeside and Amy's expertise in the background, supporting the recruitment of that hire and really understanding what we need, because I did not before Lakeside came into the picture. And full disclosure, had made a generalist hire and didn't realize that's not what we needed. But people, if you've ever been in accounting in a growing company, you usually start out, right? You have maybe a lead staff accountant, and then eventually you're like, well, we really need an accounting manager, and then we need a controller, and then you're like, holy crap, now we need a CFO. It doesn't work that way with HR. That's one of my big epic realizations, is that you actually have to probably start with an HR manager, and one day your growth may sustain adding to that team and a generalist. And part of it is HR is ever evolving.
Mhm.
So with nobody in the organization with that kind of experience and leadership, they're going to have a hard time. We're going to have a hard time developing somebody because we don't have the internal real depth of knowledge to develop somebody that may be in a generalist role.
Yeah.
So big epic realization was we needed the HR manager first. Maybe someday a generalist will be a role we need. So someday
I think,
they.
but I think it's fair too, because HR in your world still does a lot of the tactical components to HR. And so it's not, you talk strategy, which I want to be, I think it's, appreciate the fact that the lens of what HR can be a strategic partner, but in your world, they still need to be a tactical partner too, right? The idea of finding somebody that has that mix, right? I mean, that can be hard. I mean, we've all been there, finding that mix of I need strategy, yes, but you can't be you can't be too proud to still want to run payroll every
I
week,
mean,
every other week, right, Aim?
Mhm.
I fixed a toilet at some point last year, right? Like scrappy isn't an understatement. You don't come here and work and assume that there's some kind of task that's really outside of your purview. Yeah. Now, did I have the skill sets to fully fix it right? No, but we luckily have a plumbing division, and eventually they helped us out. But what you're going to do day to day here, no matter what role you are in, isn't going to meet this total defined guideline of what you think about as a CFO in a, um, you know, 5,000 person org. I am a CFO at a business unit of a couple hundred people, but we are also part of an organization of 8,000 people in a roll up. But what I do here in my role as CFO, it's not as limited or narrowed. And so that I would say that was pretty much with most of our roles here. So our HR also cannot come in and say, well, I really just want to focus on talent acquisition, or I really want to focus on this. It's like, no, you got to focus on everything. You got
Right.
to be a part of all the strategy and all the tasks and all the nuts and bolts. And that I think sometimes takes a special kind of person to want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's servant leadership too, right? The idea of, I mean, you're modeling the way in what you just described, right? That there's a piece of servant leadership to say, to make this company work, it means the toilet has to run. And that might mean I have to fix it, right? Like that piece of it is my job might have a C in the title, but that doesn't mean that I still want to have a toilet that works. So therefore I will fix said toilet. And I
Yeah.
think there's a piece to that that's really apropos to any size company, really, and should be for many size companies.
I
For
think it too.
example, when we get off this call, I'm gonna go lay out cheese slices and buns for a grill picnic we're having, and I'll probably have to clean the grill afterwards. That's what's gonna happen.
Amy, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think it too, as I know we're coming on time, right? It speaks to the evolution of the relationship as I have seen it over the course of nearly the last year. Is being in a position to very quickly get up to speed and take Dori's 6 to 9 p.m. off of her plate and make sure that that continues as seamlessly as possible. Is the B. Better understanding the organization and making recommendations for changes in programs like performance management and a manager training program in the future that can really get that next level of leaders in a space that they're prepared for succession planning, all the way up through understanding the cultural add-on of the hire that's coming in, right? Like Dori told me that toilet example as we were preparing for interviewing candidates. And so how candidates showed up was like that's how we measured it, right? The toilet measurement of are you willing to step in when you need to step in, even if it's outside of, this box of a job description that we wrote. And so I think the evolution of the relationship is For me, one of the most exciting, but albeit still bittersweet, because I will miss Yale dearly when I am not here or engaged as much. But knowing that they have a really great hire who is in week 2, we're already starting to see the pieces that she is picking up and putting into place, and how she's already engaging with the team in the way we wanted that to be the outcome from that interview and search process.
All right.
Yes.
So final last quick question for you, Dori, and then I'm going to do a quick promo for next month and we'll move on, because you're right, we are getting to the end and that went really fast. See, you can do anything for an hour. All right. Final reflection. If you were to give another company advice when they feel they are not ready for HR support yet, what would you tell them?
I guess I would tell them to really list out and think about what the barriers are. If if they're feeling like, I'm not sure if I'm ready, or we may not be ready. The fact that you're even thinking about it means you're probably coming up on being ready. There's something about to give, but there's also probably some opportunities you're missing out on that you're not thinking about. And for us, I know it was definitely on, streamlining the employee onboarding experience. That's a miss, right? How your employees feel going through that process is a big deal. Performance management's a really big deal, because when you get bigger, you stop paying as close attention to, hey, your employees feel it when you keep people in roles that they're not doing well in, right? The other employees feel that. So are we managing that properly, and making sure we're not letting our personal feelings about people get in the way of true performance management? And how do you do that? And when these questions start coming up in your mind, you kind of already know it's time to probably start thinking about how you're going to bring in some kind of professional support. And what I loved about doing the consulting thing first is it really helped us define, what do we really need and what are we really lacking and missing out on.
Well, I think if nothing else, everyone here is going to walk away with, I know there's 3 phrases everyone's going to, I'm going to go with the 6 to 9 is going to be one of the phrases. The reboarding is a phrase that I feel like will be, and then the toilet measurement. So you have now been, this 1 hour has now been wrapped up into those 3 phrases, but I think that's a beautiful, I love, that's the thing I think I'm taking away too, is that I loved how you put that, Dori. If you're at all thinking about it, it's probably time, right? The idea of if it's remotely crossing your brain, it's something you should, if nothing else, start kicking the tires on. And I think that's a beautiful way to end that conversation. I think that's great. Thank you, both of you, for your voice and for sharing and being a part of today's Lakeside Chat. There's a part of me just goes, there's a beauty in terms of the relation. You can see, even if you're not in the same room, that you guys have built such a beautiful friendship and working relationship. And so I really do, it's been a beauty to get a chance to sort of watch you two in action as well. With that, we have 2 minutes left. So I want to just remind you that in July, Lakeside goes off script and we don't do a webinar. So don't hold your 9 a.m. Time frame on next month. Instead, hold your evening. So we will be doing Lakeside Live. Our 3rd annual Lakeside Live is going to be hosted at the Minnesota Valley Country Club on July 21st. We will make sure that we get you as in the follow-up material. I'll make sure that I get the link to get you registered and get you signed up. But we would love, our goal for this is really to say that we've built this beautiful community of people in a virtual space. We want to have some opportunity to be able to raise a glass and celebrate in person as well, with a little bit of water and greenery in the background. So excited to have you guys there and look forward to having the July Lakeside Live instead of a webinar. And then watch your calendars, because we will get August back up and running. We've got a couple really good topics on the horizon for August and September. But with that, 10 o'clock. Thank you both. Have a great barbecue. Amy, bring me back a cheeseburger.
Well.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
Bye.